From a remote village, he rose through revolution and war, until an entire nation stood beneath his shadow. He promised to transform China in a single generation. But the dream demanded a price no one could fully count. How did a revolution promising freedom turn against its own people and consume even those closest to power?
The son of Shaoshan. Long before Mao Zedong became the face of a revolution, he was a farmer's son in a quiet valley of Hunan. The armies, campaigns, and immense human cost associated with his rule still lay ahead. In the beginning, there was only a boy born into a declining empire. Mao Zedong was born on December 26, 1893, in Shaoshan, during the final decades of the Qing dynasty. China was weakened by foreign pressure, military defeats, and internal rebellion. Yet Mao's family was not among the village's poorest. His father, Mao Zedong, had become a prosperous farmer and grain trader. His mother, Wen Qimei, was a devout Buddhist remembered for her compassion. Their private family life is difficult to reconstruct. Many familiar stories come from Mao's account, recorded decades later by the journalist Edgar Snow. He described his father as strict and quick-tempered, and his mother as gentle and protective. The contrast may contain truth, but these were the memories of a political leader shaping his own story. At about 8, Mao entered a traditional village school and studied the Confucian classics. He disliked rote learning but read historical romances outside the curriculum. Stories of rebellion and collapsing dynasties seized his imagination. Their influence should not be overstated, yet they suggested that rulers could fall and people of obscure origins could enter history. When Mao was about 14, his family arranged his marriage to Luo Yixio, an older young woman. The marriage is documented. Its private reality is less certain. Mao later said he never accepted Luo Yixio as his wife, and that the union was not consummated. But this rests mainly on his retrospective testimony. Luo Yixio lived in the Mao household and died in 1910. The experience appears to have strengthened Mao's opposition to arranged marriage. Around 16, Mao left Shaoshan for a modern education, first in Dongshan and then in Changsha. There he encountered newspapers, reformist arguments, and nationalism. When revolution spread in 1911 and the Qing dynasty began to collapse, Mao briefly enlisted as a private in a Hunan revolutionary unit. He seems to have seen little or no combat. He was only a young man watching an ancient order disappear. After several false starts, Mao entered Hunan First Normal School, studying there from 1913 to 1918. Teachers such as Yang Changji introduced him to the debates transforming educated China. Mao read New Youth, joined student politics, and helped organize the New People's Study Society. His beliefs remained unsettled. Nationalism, liberal reform, anarchism, and socialism competed for his attention. In 1918, Mao traveled to Beijing and found poorly paid work in the Peking University Library under Li Dezhao, an early Chinese interpreter of Marxism. Mao stood at the edge of this intellectual world, yet he read and listened as the Russian Revolution made radical change appear possible. The May 4th protests of 1919, driven partly by anger over Japan's gains in Shandong under the Versailles settlement, turned unrest into a wider awakening. Back in Changsha, Mao edited the Xiang River Review, organized students, and challenged Hunan's warlord government. His language sharpened, but Marxism had not yet become his final answer. Mao Zedong had not built an army, commanded a party, or ruled a nation. He was still a young teacher and activist. But he had learned that empires could fall, and ideas, joined to organization, could become weapons. Part 2, The Party is Born. By 1920, China's empire was gone, but peace had not followed. Warlords divided provinces, foreign powers retained privileges, and the republic seemed unable to defend itself. To Mao Zedong and many of his generation, reform no longer appeared sufficient. Moving between Changsha, Beijing, and Shanghai, Mao read Marxist works and met radical intellectuals. In late 1920, he described himself as a Marxist, in theory, and to some extent in action. His conversion was gradual, passing through nationalism, anarchism, and democratic reform. Marxism offered an explanation for China's weakness and a disciplined theory of revolution. That year, Mao married Yang Kaihui, daughter of his former teacher Yang Chongji. Unlike his arranged union with Luo Yixio, this was a chosen relationship. Yang Kaihui was educated, politically active, and became a communist organizer. In July 1921, Mao traveled to Shanghai as a Hunan delegate to the First National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party. 13 Chinese delegates attended, representing roughly 50 members. After police attention threatened the meeting, its final session moved to a boat near Jiaxing. Some details come from later recollections, but Mao was not yet the party's master. He was one founder among several. Qin Duxiu possessed greater authority. Back in Hunan, Mao built party branches and labor organizations. Communists helped organize workers in Changsha and the Anyuan mining district. Yet the party remained small. Marxist doctrine emphasized industrial workers, while China was overwhelmingly rural. Mao's native province was filled mainly with peasants burdened by rent, debt, taxes, and local power holders. This weakness encouraged an uneasy alliance. Guided by the Soviet-led Comintern, communists entered Sun Yat-sen's nationalist party, the Kuomintang, while keeping their own organization. The First United Front, formed in 1924, sought to defeat the warlords and reunify China. Mao worked in Kuomintang propaganda and, in 1926, directed a session of its Peasant Movement Training Institute in Guangzhou. Distrust remained beneath the alliance. Sun Yat-sen's death in 1925 removed the figure who had helped hold its rival forces together. Chiang Kai-shek rose within the nationalist movement as strikes and peasant associations spread alongside the Northern Expedition. For the nationalists and communists, the expedition promised to end the power of the warlords. But for landlords, merchants, conservative officers, and foreign interests, the growing movement carried another threat. What had begun as a national revolution appeared to be turning into a social revolution. Mao increasingly turned his attention toward the countryside. In early 1927, he investigated peasant movements in several Hunan counties and wrote his report on an investigation of the peasant movement in Hunan. He argued that peasants were not merely a passive mass waiting for urban revolutionaries to lead them. They possessed the numbers and anger required to overturn village hierarchies themselves. In some areas, peasant associations challenged landlords, religious authorities, clan leaders, and customs that had governed rural life for generations. The report reflected a genuine wave of rural mobilization. Yet its sweeping confidence also served Mao's political argument and should not be read as a neutral description of every village in Hunan. Violence, local rivalries, and differing peasant interests made the countryside more complicated than any single report could capture. Then the alliance collapsed. On April 12, 1927, forces aligned with Chiang Kai-shek began a violent purge of communists and labor activists in Shanghai. Arrests and killings spread to other cities. The nationalist government in Wuhan, which had initially continued cooperating with the communists, later expelled them as well. Estimates of the death toll from the broader repression vary, and surviving records are incomplete. Its political effect, however, is clear. The First United Front was destroyed, communist networks were shattered, and thousands of activists were killed, imprisoned, or forced into hiding. The small party Mao Zedong had helped establish was driven underground. Its urban strategy lay in ruins, and survival demanded another road. For Mao Zedong, that road led away from China's great cities and into the mountains, where political argument would soon become armed rebellion. Part 3: The Mountains and the Gun. In September 1927, Mao Zedong helped lead the autumn harvest uprising along the Hunan-Jiangxi border. Communists expected peasants, workers, and rebellious soldiers to seize towns and threaten Changsha. Instead, the uprising was defeated. Mao abandoned the attack on the provincial capital and led survivors south. The defeat pushed him toward another road. The survivors entered the Jinggang Mountains, a remote borderland with little government control. Mao worked with local armed groups to turn soldiers, bandits, and peasants into a revolutionary force. In 1928, troops commanded by Zhu De and Chun Yi joined him, helping form the Chinese Red Army. Weapons, food, and medicine were scarce. Mao emphasized mobility, political instruction, and relations with villagers. Soldiers were ordered to limit damage and pay for supplies when possible. These rules were not always obeyed, but they distinguished the communists from many armies crossing rural China. The revolution also relied on coercion. Land was confiscated and redistributed, while landlords and alleged counter-revolutionaries faced imprisonment, humiliation, or execution. Class labels were applied unevenly, and village rivalries could become political accusations. During the anti-Bolshevik League purges and the 1930 Futian incident, communist soldiers and local officials were arrested, tortured, or killed. The number of victims remains disputed, and responsibility extended beyond one person. Mao, however, supported the purge and strengthened his position through it. The revolutionary base was therefore not merely a refuge from nationalist repression. It was also a place where the communists exercised authority, punished suspected enemies, and fought among themselves over who would control the movement. In 1930, nationalist authorities arrested Yang Kaihui in Hunan and executed her. Later communist accounts state that she refused to denounce Mao, although the precise words attributed to her cannot be independently confirmed. By then, Mao had formed a relationship with He Zhejian in the mountain base. The circumstances and timing remained controversial, but years of separation and underground warfare had already destroyed the family life Mao and Yang Kaihui once shared. Communist forces eventually moved into southern Jiangxi. In November 1931, delegates proclaimed the Chinese Soviet Republic at Ruijin, with Mao as chairman of its central executive government. It was a state within a state, possessing its own administration, courts, army, currency, and land policies. Redistribution gave some poor peasants access to land and new political influence. For those classified as landlords, rich peasants, or political enemies, it could mean confiscation, punishment, imprisonment, or death. The borders between economic reform, revenge, and political terror were not always clear. Mao's authority remained contested. Central party leaders, including some who had studied in Moscow, often favored more conventional military methods. Mao lost influence over certain decisions while remaining an important political and military figure. Later official histories sometimes credited Mao with nearly every communist victory of this period. The reality was more complicated. Command and strategy were shared among leaders including Zhu De, Zhou Enlai, Peng Dehuai, and others. Their relationships were marked by cooperation, rivalry, and changing political alliances. Chiang Kai-shek launched repeated encirclement campaigns against the Jiangxi base. The Red Army defeated the earlier offensives through mobility, ambush, and attacks against isolated nationalist units. The fifth campaign, beginning in 1933, was different. Nationalist troops advanced behind fortified blockhouses, slowly denying the communists food, territory, and room to maneuver. Communist commanders responded with costly positional warfare that reduced the advantages of guerrilla tactics. Otto Braun, the Comintern military advisor known in China as Li De, is often blamed for this failure. His advice was influential, but historians question explanations that make one foreign advisor solely responsible for decisions taken by several communist leaders. By the autumn of 1934, the Jiangxi Soviet could no longer be held. Its villages had been drained of supplies, its territory was shrinking, and its soldiers were exhausted. In October, the Central Red Army broke through the encirclement and began a retreat toward an unknown destination. It would later be remembered as the Long March. At the time, it was an escape from defeat. Part 4: The Long March. The Red Army left Jiangxi in October 1934 carrying weapons, documents, and wounded men, without knowing where it would settle. What became known as the Long March was not one journey by a single army, but several retreats along different routes. It began not as a victory, but as an escape from disaster. At the Xiang River, nationalist forces struck with devastating effect. Tens of thousands were killed, captured, deserted, or separated. Figures vary according to which units are counted, but the central force lost more than half its strength during the opening months. Heavy equipment had made its columns dangerously slow. In January 1935, communist leaders met at Junyi. Mao Zedong attacked the strategy associated with Bo Gu and Comintern military advisor Otto Braun, arguing for flexible movement instead of positional warfare. The meeting increased Mao's authority, but he did not instantly become the party's unquestioned leader, as later official history sometimes suggested. Power shifted gradually through alliances with Zhou Enlai, Wang Jiaxiong, and other senior figures. Under the new command arrangement, the Red Army crossed and recrossed the Qishui River, confusing its pursuers before moving north toward the Dadu River. The seizure of Looting Bridge became one of the revolution's most celebrated stories. According to the heroic version, selected soldiers crossed exposed iron chains while nationalist defenders fired at them from the opposite bank. The crossing occurred and was strategically important. However, historians continue to dispute the strength of the defenders, the number of casualties, and the intensity of the fighting. Later propaganda almost certainly transformed a difficult military operation into a carefully polished legend. Beyond the river waited snow-covered mountains, high passes, and marshy grasslands. Hunger, disease, exposure, exhaustion, and fighting destroyed entire units. The marchers also crossed regions inhabited by Tibetans, and other non-Han peoples. Communist accounts emphasized cooperation and promises of ethnic equality. Local memories, however, also preserve experiences of requisitioning, conflict, and fear. These encounters were more complicated than the later heroic narrative suggested. The Red Army itself nearly divided. Mao clashed with Zhang Guotao, whose forces were larger and who favored a different route and political command. Their armies separated. Zhang's troops later suffered catastrophic losses, while parts of his remaining force eventually reached the northwest. The dispute removed one of Mao's strongest rivals and further increased his authority. Yet this result had not been inevitable. During the crisis, Zhang Guotao possessed his own army, political organization, and claim to leadership. In October 1935, Mao's reduced column reached communist-controlled territory in northern Shaanxi. Estimates depend on which armies, starting points, and arrival dates are included, but only a fraction of those who had left Jiangxi arrived with the central column. The long march was therefore both survival and defeat. It preserved the communist leadership while consuming most of the army that had begun the journey. Survival, however, could be turned into political capital. In Shaanxi, communist writers portrayed the march as proof of courage, discipline, and historical destiny. Hardship became sacrifice. Retreat became a journey toward victory. Those who survived formed an elite bound together by suffering and memory. In 1936, American journalist Edgar Snow reached the communist base and interviewed Mao and other leaders. His book Red Star Over China introduced foreign readers to the image of a modest revolutionary commander living in a cave settlement. Snow recorded genuine observations and spoke with numerous participants. Yet Mao also used the interviews to shape his biography, explain the communist cause, and give the Long March a meaning larger than military survival. Meanwhile, Japanese expansion was deepening China's national crisis. In December 1936, the generals Zhang Xueliang and Yang Huqing detained Chiang Kai-shek at Xi'an. They demanded that he end the campaign against the communists and concentrate on resisting Japan. The crisis could have ended in execution or renewed civil war. Instead, negotiations followed. Zhou Enlai represented the communists in discussions that helped secure Chiang Kai-shek's release. The Xi'an incident prepared the way for another alliance between nationalists and communists, although mistrust between them never disappeared. When full-scale war with Japan erupted in 1937, Mao Zedong no longer led a defeated band wandering without a destination. He stood inside a surviving party, protected by a northern base and strengthened by a founding legend. The next struggle would be fought in the name of China itself. Part 5, Hunan, War and Power. Full-scale war between China and Japan began in July 1937. Under the Second United Front, Communist forces were reorganized as the 8th Route Army and New 4th Army, nominally under nationalist command. Yet neither side trusted the other. Chiang Kai-shek feared communist expansion. Mao Zedong expected civil war to return. Nationalist armies fought most of the large conventional battles and suffered enormous losses. Communist forces usually operated behind Japanese lines, attacking transportation networks and building rural bases. They resisted Japan while preserving their military strength and expanding political influence among the peasants. In 1938, Mao presented his theory of protracted war. Japan possessed superior weapons, industry, and military organization, he argued, but it could not control China's vast territory indefinitely. Defensive warfare, guerrilla operations, and political mobilization would gradually exhaust the invader. Time itself would become a weapon. In communist-controlled areas, organizers reduced rents and interest payments rather than immediately confiscating all privately owned land. This attracted poorer peasants without completely alienating the landowners needed for the anti-Japanese coalition. Cadres promoted literacy, women's participation, local government, and military service. These measures produced genuine support, but communist rule also demanded taxes, grain, recruits, intelligence, and obedience. Persuasion and coercion existed together. In 1940, forces commanded by Peng Dehuai struck railways, mines, roads, and Japanese positions during the 100 Regiment's offensive. The campaign demonstrated that the communists could conduct operations larger than scattered guerrilla attacks. Claims concerning casualties and destruction differ sharply among communist, Japanese, and later historical records. It is therefore difficult to establish a single reliable total. The offensive damaged Japanese transportation networks, but it also revealed the growing strength of communist forces. It was followed by brutal Japanese counter-campaigns involving widespread burning, killing, and looting across parts of northern China. Villages suspected of supporting guerrillas could lose their food, homes, and inhabitants. Once again, civilians paid much of the price for military strategy. The alliance between nationalists and communists continued to decay. In the 1941 New Fourth Army incident, nationalist forces surrounded and attacked a communist column. Both parties still spoke publicly of national unity. Behind the language of cooperation, however, each side was preparing for the conflict expected after Japan's defeat. Yan'an became the center of Mao's growing authority. Students, writers, artists, and political activists traveled there believing that they were entering a community founded on equality and sacrifice. The cave dwellings and simple uniforms were real, but they also formed part of a carefully cultivated image. Behind this appearance of austerity stood an expanding administration, political schools, propaganda offices, military institutions, and security services. Beginning in 1942, the Yan'an rectification movement required party members to study approved texts, criticize their own thinking, and confess political errors. The campaign strengthened discipline and helped absorb thousands of new recruits. It also weakened Mao's rivals and established his interpretation of Marxism as the party's accepted truth. Under the security apparatus associated with Kangsheng, alleged spies and disloyal members could face isolation, forced confessions, psychological pressure, and sometimes physical abuse. The number of people who died during the campaign remains uncertain. Some later accounts differ greatly in their estimates and descriptions. The use of coercion, however, is well documented. At the Yan'an Forum on Literature and Art, Mao argued that culture should serve workers, peasants, soldiers, and the revolutionary cause. This principle encouraged writers and artists to create accessible work for a largely rural population. At the same time, it placed creative expression beneath political authority. Art would no longer stand apart from the party's objectives. By 1945, Communist Party membership had grown from tens of thousands to more than 1 million. At the 7th Party Congress, Mao Zedong thought entered the party constitution, and Mao's supremacy was effectively secured. When Japan surrendered in August, China celebrated the end of 8 years of full-scale war. Beneath that victory, however, 2 Chinese armies were already moving to claim territory, weapons, railway lines, and the future. The foreign war was ending. The struggle for China was about to begin again. Part 6. The War for China. Japan's surrender did not bring peace. In August 1945, Mao Zedong flew to Chongqing to negotiate with Chiang Kai-shek. They spoke of coalition government, political freedoms, and a unified national army. But neither leader intended to surrender the military forces on which his power depended. American mediation produced temporary truces while armies raced to occupy territory abandoned by Japan. United States transportation moved nationalist troops toward major cities, while communist forces entered rural Manchuria following the Soviet occupation. Its weapons, railways, and former Japanese industrial centers made northeastern China the most valuable battlefield in the country. By 1946, full-scale civil war had resumed. The nationalists possessed larger armies, aircraft, major cities, and international recognition. They captured Yan'an in 1947, but Mao and the communist leadership had already withdrawn. Rather than sacrifice their forces to defend symbolic territory, the communists remained mobile, surrendered cities when necessary, and attacked isolated or overstretched nationalist units. The war in the countryside was also a social revolution. Communist land reform confiscated property and redistributed it among poorer villagers. For many peasants, the revolution offered land, political influence, and freedom from debts that had shaped their families' lives for generations. The policy helped the communists gain recruits, supplies, and information. Yet its enforcement frequently involved struggle meetings, public humiliation, beatings, executions, and accusations influenced by old village rivalries. Policies varied between regions, and the total number killed remains disputed. Support for land reform could be genuine, while the methods used to impose it remained violent. Nationalist power weakened through corruption, forced conscription, collapsing morale, and severe inflation. Soldiers sometimes went unpaid or lacked food, while civilians watched their savings disappear as the currency lost value. These failures did not make communist victory inevitable, nor was Mao its only architect. Commanders including Lin Biao, Lu Bocheng, Chen Yi, Su Yu, and Peng Dehuai directed major campaigns. Political organizers recruited villagers, while enormous numbers of civilian laborers carried ammunition, food, and wounded soldiers. The human cost appeared with terrible clarity at Changchun in 1948. Communist forces blockaded the nationalist-held city until its defenders surrendered. Civilians trapped between the opposing armies slowly exhausted their food and began to starve. Estimates of the number who died range from tens of thousands to well above 100,000. The surviving evidence does not provide a universally accepted total. Responsibility extended beyond one commander or decision. Nationalist authorities continued defending the city while its population suffered. But communist commanders deliberately used hunger as military pressure. Mao's central leadership ultimately supported the siege. Victory was purchased with civilian lives. 3 campaigns decided the war. During the Liaoshen campaign, communist forces secured Manchuria. At Huaihai, major nationalist armies were surrounded and destroyed or forced to surrender across central China. During the Pingjing campaign, Beijing, then officially called Beiping, surrendered without the devastation feared from a prolonged assault. Civilian porters played an essential role in communist logistics. Later propaganda transformed this complicated mixture of voluntary support, political organization, obligation, and coercion into an image of effortless national unity. By early 1949, the military balance had collapsed. Communist armies crossed the Yangtze River and captured Nanjing in April. Shanghai fell in May. Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalist government withdrew to Taiwan, carrying troops, state assets, official records, and the hope of one day returning to the mainland. On October 1, 1949, Mao Zedong stood above Tiananmen Square and proclaimed the People's Republic of China. For his supporters, the moment promised national unity, an end to foreign humiliation, and the transformation of an unequal society. For defeated nationalists, landlords, religious communities, business owners, and others uncertain of communist rule, it marked the beginning of exile, dispossession, or fear. Mao had achieved what once appeared impossible. The provincial activist from Hunan now ruled most of the world's most populous country. But military victory had not answered the deeper question of how that country would be governed. The revolutionary had captured the state. He was about to discover what unlimited power could demand, and what it could destroy. Part 7. Revolution becomes the state. The People's Republic inherited a country damaged by decades of war. Railways were broken, factories stood idle, inflation had destroyed savings, and government authority remained uncertain in many regions. During its first years, the communist state restored order, stabilized the currency, and rebuilt production. For millions of Chinese people, these achievements were real. So was the price of consolidation. The 1950 marriage law outlawed forced marriage, concubinage, child betrothal, and interference with divorce. It gave women legal rights that challenged deeply rooted patriarchal customs, although enforcement varied and resistance could be fierce. Public health programs, literacy classes, and political organizations also carried the new state into the daily lives of ordinary people. Land reform transferred property from landlords to poorer peasants. For many rural families, it ended generations of dependence and provided access to land for the first time. Alongside redistribution, however, came public accusation meetings, beatings, executions, and permanent class labels. A family's assigned political background could influence education, employment, and social treatment for decades. The campaign to suppress counter-revolutionaries targeted former nationalist officials. Secret societies, religious figures, suspected agents, and alleged enemies of the new government. Estimates of deaths across these overlapping campaigns vary widely. Records are incomplete, definitions differ, and some categories cannot be separated with confidence. What is clear is that terror was not merely the result of uncontrolled local officials. Mao Zedong and the central leadership approved mass repression as a means of destroying opposition and securing the new regime. Foreign war accelerated the process. During the Korean War, United Nations forces crossed the 38th parallel and advanced toward the Chinese border. In October 1950, Mao ordered Chinese forces into Korea. He believed intervention would prevent a hostile army from reaching the Yalu River and threatening the newly established People's Republic. Chinese intervention drove United Nations forces south, but it produced years of costly fighting in extreme conditions. Estimates of Chinese military deaths vary considerably according to which forces and causes are included. Mao's own son, Mao Zedong, was killed during an air attack in November 1950. The armistice signed in 1953 left the Korean peninsula divided. China gained prestige by fighting the United States and its allies to a stalemate, but the war also deepened its diplomatic and economic isolation. At home, wartime mobilization strengthened Communist Party control and justified further campaigns against suspected internal enemies. Economic transformation followed a Soviet model. The first five-year plan concentrated investment on steel, coal, machinery, electricity, transportation, and large state-owned industries. Soviet loans, engineers, technical specialists, and industrial designs assisted the program. Industrial output grew rapidly, major construction projects appeared, and urban employment expanded. Yet agriculture and consumer goods received less investment, creating imbalances that would soon become dangerous. Mao also accelerated the collectivization of agriculture. By 1956, most rural households had entered agricultural cooperatives, surrendering much of their independent control over land, tools, and production. Private commerce and industry were gradually placed under state ownership or supervision. The speed of this transformation exceeded earlier schedules. It revealed Mao's growing conviction that political enthusiasm and human will could overcome economic caution. In 1956 and 1957, Mao encouraged criticism under the slogan, "Let 100 flowers bloom." Writers, teachers, scientists, students, and officials initially hesitated. They remembered earlier campaigns and understood the danger of speaking too freely. When criticism finally came, it went far beyond minor administrative advice. People attacked bureaucracy, privilege, censorship, political persecution, and even the Communist Party's monopoly on power. The leadership reversed course. During the anti-rightist campaign, hundreds of thousands of people were labeled political enemies. Many lost their employment, reputations, families, freedom, or years of their lives in labor and internal exile. Historians still debate Mao's original intention. Some interpret the 100 Flowers campaign as a deliberate trap designed to expose opponents. Others view it as a genuine attempt at controlled criticism that Mao abandoned when the response became politically threatening. The surviving evidence does not support a simple or completely certain answer. By the end of 1957, organized dissent had been silenced. Intellectuals had learned to conceal their doubts. Officials who understood agriculture, industry, or statistics had learned the danger of contradicting the chairman. China was ready for Mao's most ambitious experiment, and it was now less prepared than ever to question him. Part 8. The Great Leap into Famine. In 1958, Mao Zedong launched the Great Leap Forward. He believed China could escape poverty through mass enthusiasm, rapid collectivization, and extraordinary labor. Development would no longer wait for experts, capital, or gradual planning. Human will would force history to move faster. Rural cooperatives were merged into vast people's communes. Families ate in communal kitchens, private plots were restricted or abolished, and labor was redirected toward irrigation projects, roads, construction, and industry. Across the countryside, backyard furnaces consumed tools, cooking pots, farm equipment, and anything else that could be melted. The campaign produced impressive steel production figures on paper. Much of the metal itself was useless. Meanwhile, millions of rural workers had been diverted from planting, maintaining fields, and gathering harvests. Agricultural experiments promoted deep plowing and dense planting, often without reliable scientific evidence. Officials competed to announce impossible harvests because failure could be interpreted as political disloyalty. Each level of government exaggerated the figures it sent upward. Higher authorities then calculated grain procurement according to these false reports. The state removed food that existed only on paper, leaving real villages with too little grain to survive. Communal kitchens initially served generous meals in some areas, encouraging the belief that food had become abundant. When the stores were emptied, rationing tightened, and the kitchens began to close. Rural people could not easily leave in search of food because movement was controlled. Cities, industrial workers, and politically favored groups generally received greater protection from the worst shortages. Drought, flooding, regional crop failures, and the later withdrawal of Soviet specialists worsened China's difficulties. These factors were real, but most historians identify government policy, excessive procurement, administrative dishonesty, and political coercion as the central causes of the catastrophe. By 1959, reports of hunger were spreading. At the Lushan Conference, Defense Minister Peng Dehuai sent Mao a private letter criticizing exaggeration, economic disorder, and rural suffering. Mao interpreted the letter as a political attack on his leadership. Peng Dehuai was condemned and removed from power. The message to other officials was unmistakable. Honest reports could destroy a career. Silence could preserve one. The Great Leap was renewed at a moment when retreat might still have reduced the scale of the disaster. From 1959 to 1961, famine consumed much of rural China. Families sold or exchanged their remaining possessions. People ate leaves, tree bark, wild plants, and substances with almost no nutritional value. Children and elderly relatives weakened first. Local archives and survivor testimonies also document beatings, forced labor, withholding of food, and desperate acts of survival. Grain continued to be collected from severely affected districts, even while villagers were dying. No exact death toll can be established. Demographic studies use different assumptions concerning expected births, normal mortality, migration, and incomplete population records. Scholarly estimates commonly range from approximately 15 million to 40 million excess deaths, with some estimates falling outside that range. Whatever number is chosen, the central fact remains: tens of millions of people died prematurely, overwhelmingly in the countryside. Responsibility extended throughout the party state. Provincial leaders inflated results. Local officials enforced grain collections. Senior leaders failed to stop policies they increasingly understood were disastrous. Yet Mao was the campaign's principal author and political protector. His authority transformed unrealistic targets into commands and criticism into suspected betrayal. Recovery began only when leaders including Liu Shaoqi, Deng Xiaoping, Chen Yun, and Zhou Enlai reduced commune controls, restored private plots and material incentives, imported grain, and lowered procurement demands. At the 1962 7,000 cadres conference, Mao accepted formal responsibility in broad terms. The famine itself, however, was not openly investigated before the Chinese public. Production slowly returned. Mao's prestige had been damaged within the leadership, while practical officials gained greater influence over daily economic policy. But Mao did not conclude that revolutionary ambition itself had failed. He increasingly feared that moderation was restoring capitalism, weakening class struggle, and allowing a new privileged class to grow inside the Communist Party. The famine ended. The search for enemies did not. Part 9. The revolution turns inward. By 1962, China was slowly emerging from famine. Under Liu Shaoqi, Deng Xiaoping, and the cautious economic planner Chen Yun, communes were reduced in size, private farming plots returned, and material incentives were quietly restored. Grain production began to recover. Markets reopened. After years of hunger, ordinary life showed signs of stability. But Mao Zedong saw danger in this recovery. To Mao, pragmatic policies resembled the path followed by the Soviet Union after Joseph Stalin's death, a retreat from revolutionary struggle toward bureaucracy, privilege, and what he called revisionism. He feared that China's Communist Party might create a new ruling class and eventually restore capitalism. He also understood that Liu Shaoqi's growing authority threatened his own political dominance. The socialist education movement, launched in 1963, attempted to cleanse rural government through investigations known as the Four Cleanups. Yet Mao believed senior officials were limiting the campaign. The enemy, he concluded, was not merely outside the party. It was hidden within it. The opening attack came through culture. In November 1965, the critic Yao Wenyuan denounced a historical play by Hunan titled Hai Rui dismissed from office. The drama concerned an honest Ming official punished for confronting an emperor. Mao supporters treated it as a disguised defense of Peng Dehuai, though historians continue to debate how deliberately the play was written as a political allegory. In May 1966, a party notification announced the beginning of what became the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. It warned of bourgeois representatives occupying positions inside the Communist Party. The language was vague, but its purpose was powerful. Anyone could be accused, and no rank offered permanent protection. That summer, Mao appeared to swim across the Yangtze River, a carefully publicized demonstration that the 72-year-old chairman remained vigorous. Soon afterward, he called upon China's youth to rebel. Students formed groups known as the Red Guards. At enormous rallies in Tiananmen Square, Mao greeted crowds carrying his portrait and waving copies of quotations from Chairman Mao Zedong. The Little Red Book, promoted by Defense Minister Lin Biao. Mao's message, "Bombard the headquarters," gave young activists permission to challenge teachers, officials, intellectuals, and even their own parents. The Red Guards attacked the for olds, old customs, culture, habits, and ideas. Temples were damaged, books burned, homes searched, and historical objects destroyed. People accused of belonging to undesirable social classes were paraded through streets, forced into humiliating struggle sessions, beaten, imprisoned, or killed. The movement was not controlled through a single chain of command. Local rivalries, personal grievances, and competing Red Guard factions shaped much of the violence. Yet Mao had deliberately broken restraints, praised rebellion, and protected radical groups while established institutions collapsed. He did not direct every assault, but he bore central responsibility for creating the political conditions in which such assaults became possible. By 1967, rival factions were fighting one another, sometimes with weapons seized from factories and military units. Production suffered, schools closed, and sections of the government ceased to function. Mao finally relied on the People's Liberation Army to restore order. Revolutionary committees replaced many existing authorities, while millions of urban youths were later sent to the countryside to learn from peasants. For many, this meant years of interrupted education, separation, and hard labor. Liu Shaoqi was denounced as China's leading capitalist roader. Removed from office, publicly humiliated, and held in harsh confinement, he died in Kaifeng in 1969 after serious illness and inadequate care. His death was concealed from the public. Deng Xiaoping was also purged and sent to work in rural Jiangxi. At the Ninth Party Congress in 1969, Lin Biao was formally named Mao's successor. But within 2 years, the alliance collapsed. In September 1971, Lin died when his aircraft crashed in Mongolia. The official account claimed that he had fled after a failed plot against Mao. Important evidence remains incomplete, and historians still dispute the precise sequence of events and the extent of Lin's personal involvement. The man presented as Mao's closest companion had vanished into the night sky. The revolution had consumed another heir. And behind the portraits, slogans, and disciplined applause, trust within China's leadership was quietly dying. Part 10: The Last Years and the Long Shadow. After Lin Biao's death in 1971, Mao Zedong remained China's supreme leader. But the political world around him had become increasingly fragile. One chosen successor had been purged and left to die in confinement. Another had disappeared in a plane crash under circumstances that remained uncertain. The revolution had destroyed many of the institutions and relationships on which stable government depended. Yet while China remained divided at home, Mao prepared a remarkable change in foreign policy. Relations with the Soviet Union had deteriorated into ideological hostility and armed tension along the border. Mao now regarded Moscow as a more immediate threat than Washington. Quiet contacts began with the United States, assisted by Pakistan, and followed by Henry Kissinger's secret visit to Beijing in 1971. That October, the People's Republic of China took China's seat at the United Nations. Then, in February 1972, American President Richard Nixon arrived in Beijing. The image of Mao receiving the leader of a country he had condemned for decades was one of the defining scenes of the Cold War. Mao and Nixon did not resolve the deep differences between their governments. The status of Taiwan remained disputed, and formal diplomatic relations would not be established until 1979. But the Shanghai Communique opened a path toward cooperation and transformed the balance between China, the United States, and the Soviet Union. It was a triumph of strategic pragmatism from a leader who continued to demand ideological struggle at home. Premier Zhou Enlai attempted to restore administration, education, and economic planning after the worst chaos of the Cultural Revolution. Deng Xiaoping returned to public life in 1973 and gradually took responsibility for rebuilding government institutions. By 1975, Deng was promoting order, technical expertise, and economic modernization. To Mao's radical supporters, these policies looked like another retreat from revolution. Jiang Qing, Mao's wife, and her political allies Zhang Chunqiao, Yao Wenyuan, and Wang Hongwen defended the Cultural Revolution and attacked officials associated with moderation. They would later become known as the Gang of Four. Mao stood between the competing groups, supporting one side and then restraining it, allowing neither to gain complete control. Whether this reflected deliberate political balancing, declining judgment, or both remains debated. What is clear is that the uncertainty preserved Mao's authority, while leaving the future of China dangerously unresolved. His health was now failing. His eyesight weakened, his speech became difficult to understand, and movement required increasing assistance. Foreign visitors still came to meet him, But the powerful figure displayed in official portraits was gradually disappearing behind age and illness. On January 8, 1976, Zhou Enlai died from cancer. Zhou had participated in many of Mao's campaigns, yet he was remembered by numerous Chinese citizens as a restraining and stabilizing presence. Public grief grew rapidly. During the traditional Qingming festival in April, crowds placed wreaths and poems in Tiananmen Square to honor Zhou. Some messages also criticized the radicals and, indirectly, Mao's rule. When the memorials were removed, demonstrations followed. The authorities suppressed the gathering, declared it a counter-revolutionary incident, and blamed Deng Xiaoping. Deng was once again stripped of his positions. Mao instead elevated the relatively little-known Hua Guofeng, who seemed acceptable to both the radicals and senior officials. But there was no secure succession. China was waiting for a leader whose final decisions had become increasingly difficult to predict. In July, a devastating earthquake destroyed much of Tangshan and killed hundreds of thousands of people. For many, the disaster added to a feeling that an era was approaching its end. On September 9, 1976, Mao Zedong died at the age of 82. Public mourning was enormous. Some grief was shaped by political ritual and fear, but much of it was sincere. For millions, Mao was inseparable from revolution, national independence, and the founding of the new state. They had never known the People's Republic without him. Less than 1 month later, Hua Guofeng and senior military leaders arrested Jiang Qing and her allies. The Gang of Four fell without a national civil war. The Cultural Revolution was effectively over. Mao's legacy could not be reduced to either worship or condemnation. Under his leadership, a powerful central state was rebuilt across mainland China. Foreign domination was rejected, basic literacy and public health expanded, women gained important legal rights, and foundations for later industrial development were established. But these achievements came beside immense suffering. Political campaigns destroyed lives and silenced criticism. The Great Leap Forward contributed to a famine in which tens of millions died prematurely, though exact estimates remain disputed. The Cultural Revolution brought persecution, fractured families, ruined educations, and damaged China's historical and cultural inheritance. Mao had promised liberation from oppression. He also created a system in which loyalty to one leader could become more powerful than evidence, law, or human life. His portrait still watched over Tiananmen Square. His body was placed inside a mausoleum at its center. The revolutionary who had fought emperors had become the central symbol of the state he created. Mao Zedong had remade China. The scale of that transformation was extraordinary. And so was its cost.